Welcome to sleep with myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The stars that forgot to shine, the lament of the sky. Part 1. The night the light went silent. There are nights that arrive like a soft confession, when the air turns thin and the world listens without knowing it is listening. On such a night, the horizon folded itself away and the wind pressed a hush against the roofs of sleeping homes. Crickets held their breath. Rivers forgot their names. And above it all, the sky, the ancient veil, the endless witness, the keeper of every vow, discovered that its stars would not wake. At first it was a small forgetting, like a musician who pauses one note too long. The shepherd whose flock slept beyond the olive trees waited for the bright nail of the North Star to pierce the dark. It did not. A sailor on a distant coast lifted his hand, tracing patterns he had known since childhood. The constellations he sought were smudges, the familiar songs lost between beats. Over mountains, deserts, and orchards, every gaze that tilted upward found not glitter, but a single velvet breath of ink. Children called it magic. Elders called it omen. Poets called it a door. But above names and beneath silence, something older stirred. The sky itself woke to its own grief. It had never needed to move. It was motion. It had never needed to speak. It was speech. Yet now, without the trembling choir of stars, the sky discovered hollowness. Not absence like a wound, but absence like a bell that refuses to ring. The galaxies still turned. The great dark river still flowed. But no lamp pierced the water. The night had become an unbroken mirror, and the sky, seeing itself at last, felt an ache so vast that even time required a moment to steady. Where are my children? The sky wondered. What dream took them so far that even I cannot follow? The moon, silver and soft, rose to console. She was a pale boat carrying hush across a lake of ink. Perhaps they are not gone, she said. Perhaps they have simply fallen asleep. Then why does the darkness feel like memory? Asked the sky. Because memory is a kind of sleep, said the moon, and set a sheen upon rivers so lovers could still find each other's hands. Across the earth, lanterns bloomed like small defiant flowers. Monasteries lit their oil lamps. Fishermen knotted their nets by firelight. A widow placed a candle on her windowsill and told it to be brave. The world made stars of its own, dim and mortal, yes, but warm and close and stubborn. Still the sky wept, not with rain, but with a deep, invisible longing that made the air taste of iron and falling leaves. Far below, in a city of many bridges, a girl named Mira felt it in her bones. She was an apprentice mapmaker, ink-stained and sleepless, with a habit of standing in doorways as if thresholds could tell the future. Her teacher had taught her to chart the sky, not just to copy the routes of sailors, but to listen for the way light traveled, how it breathed, where it chose to rest. Every star is a story, he often said, and every story has a direction. On the night the light went silent, the master did not come to the workshop. His lamp remained dark. Mira climbed to the roof with a bundle of parchment and found an emptiness so complete it made her dizzy. The city's chimneys were black teeth against a mouth of deeper black. "If I cannot map the light," she whispered, "perhaps I can map its absence." She dipped her quill. She drew the night, vast and unbroken, a single shape with no seam. Her lines failed. Her hand shook. The page refused to hold what had no edges. "Who taught you to draw what cannot be held?" asked the wind, not unkindly. "No one," she said, "but I must learn." In another corner of the world, an old singer woke without knowing why. He had the habit of rising when birds did, though he lived too far north for birds in winter. He opened his door and gazed upward, expecting his favorite cluster. The 7 small fires that had always made him feel less alone. He found ink upon ink. "Ah," he said softly, "so it is grief tonight." He lit his stove and brewed tea, and when the kettle sang he hummed low to teach the air how to answer. The sky listened. It could hear everything. The crack of ice on a river's lip, the tight thread of a mother's prayer, the long exhale of a mountain as it forgot snow. But above all it heard the quiet industry of mortal hands. Lamps tended, doors opened, songs remade. The sky loved those hands. It loved them so fiercely that its ache became a vow. "If the stars will not shine, I will find them. If they have been stolen, I will mourn them. If they have chosen silence, I will learn to sing it back into light." But how does a canopy travel? How does a boundless thing go somewhere else? The answer arrived like a drift of ash. You do not move, you gather. The sky began to pull its stories close. It collected the smoke from hearths where families read by candle. It gathered the breath of horses, the glitter of frost on roof tiles, the luminous white of moth wings beating against shutters. It asked the moon for a thin blade of silver, and the moon, who loved all thresholds, gave willingly, swallowed the cold, and the cold shone. It tasted heat, and heat became a kind of star. Everything that rose, the sky gathered. Everything that fell, the sky learned. And still the true lights did not wake. "Whom will you ask?" the moon wondered. "The one who knows why light is heavy," said the sky, "and why silence walks like a king." The moon grew dim with worry. "Do you mean the keeper of the deep?" "I do." The keeper of the deep had no body and needed none. It was the gravity in old songs, the weight that makes vows kneel. It lived not beneath the world, but beneath the breath between worlds. Some called it law, some called it mercy. Most called it myth when telling children not to linger at open windows after midnight. The sky had not spoken to the keeper since the first dawn, when all things were still choosing their names. To summon the deep was simple and terrible. The sky must go quiet enough to hear the place where silence ends. On the second night, with the moon thin as a sigh, the sky stilled even its weeping. It folded winds. It unmade thunder. Closed its own distance. Below, Mira felt the change and shivered. The city seemed to tilt, as if a giant ear pressed itself to the earth. Lamps flickered. Dogs whimpered. She tucked the map she could not draw into her coat and went to the bridge that loved the oldest river. She stood there and waited, because she had always been good at waiting. The sky spoke into the quiet where worlds begin and end. "Keeper," it said, "my children have forgotten their shine." The deep did not answer in words. It answered in memory. A vision of hands cupping fire against the first wind. A cave wall blooming with ochre and ash. A mother naming her child in the dark so that the dark would learn the child's shape. The vision was not comfort. It was instruction. "It is mortals I must ask," the sky realized. "They have practiced light against forgetting." And so the sky bent down. It has always been bending, though we do not always feel it. The weight of night is the curve of attention. On the third evening, when lamps were being trimmed and kettles kissed their lids, a hush fell over the city of bridges and Myra's skin lifted into gooseflesh. The dark above her did not glitter, but it regarded her. A note struck on a string so long its other end rang behind the moon. "Mortal," said the sky. Myra did not kneel. She had no training for kneeling. She set her palms on the cold stone of the bridge and lifted her face. "Yes. Tell me how to wake a star." She almost laughed, but the question was asked too gently to mock. "You are the sky," she said. "You wake us. We only watch." "Not tonight." Myra thought of her master, of the blank map, of sailors and shepherds and the tiny flame in a widow's window. She thought of how the city, vast and unsentimental, had grown gentler under a sky without lamps. "When I was little," she said, "my mother told me that stars are holes poked in a curtain so that love can look through. I do not think that is true, but I liked it." "Curtain," murmured the sky, a word it had never needed. "And she said," Myra continued, "that sometimes love must be invited, not begged, not bribed, invited." "How do mortals invite light?" Myra looked down at the river. It held the night so carefully she wanted to cry. "By making a place for it," she said. "By becoming a shape it might want to fill. I am already all places." "Yes," she said softly. "And that may be the trouble." The sky, which had taught prophets and erased empires, considered this. "Will you help me?" it asked. "I don't know how." "Neither do I," said the sky, and in its voice was something that made Myra forgive it for every storm and every late frost. Humility. She nodded. "Then we begin with a table." "A table," said the sky, trying the shape of the word like a new constellation. "A table is where we meet," said Myra. "Where we share, where we tell the truth slowly. I will gather those who remember how to invite what cannot be commanded." "Priests?" asked the sky. "Perhaps," said Myra. "But also bakers, widows, sailors, sisters, poets. Anyone who has carried a flame through wind and kept it living." The sky bowed, though bowing was only an idea. "I will wait." "You have always been good at that," she said, and the sky startled at the compliment, for no one had ever called its patience tender. That night, Myra walked the city with a lantern shaped like a small sun. She knocked on doors and did not try to explain much. She said the night was waiting, that they were to bring one light and one story of how they had kept it. Some refused. Many came. They gathered on the oldest bridge, the place where feet and water had taught each other to be brave. The baker brought honey candles and the smell of warm bread. A sailor brought a lamp crusted with salt and the memory of a far storm. The widow brought a candle stub wrapped in blue thread, all she had left from a winter of long grief. They set their lights upon the stone, not in lines or circles, but as hands set them, lovingly, awkwardly true. The river smiled up at each flame and doubled it. The moon, feeling useful for the first time in 3 nights, leaned close enough to find herself reflected in every drop. "Now what?" the sky asked, softer than dew. "Now we listen," said Mira. "To what?" "To the place where the light chooses us back." They listened. The city's noises became faraway animals. The bridge breathed beneath their feet. Somewhere a child laughed in sleep. The thin blade of moon quivered, and for a moment, just a breath, it seemed that the black above them thinned like silk held against a candle. Not a star, not yet, but a suggestion. The sky trembled. "Do you feel that?" Mira whispered. "Yes," said the sky. "It is like the first word of a line that has not been written." They waited longer. They told small stories. The sailor spoke of a lamp that refused to die even when the deck flooded and the mast screamed. The baker told of a night when his oven cooled and the dough, patient and stubborn, rose anyway. Mira found her master shuffling through the crowd, eyes bright, hands steady. "I came to learn," he said, and stood with his students because everyone was a student now. Hours passed. The lamps burned low. The widow's candle sputtered, fought, and mastered itself again. Mira thought of curtain holes, of tables, of love that needs inviting. She set her palms once more upon the old bridge and whispered, "We made a place. We are the shape. If you wish, come." For a long and holy moment, nothing happened, like the last held breath at the end of a song. Then something did. Far above, barely awake, a single point remembered how to glow. It did not blaze. It admitted, a modest pinprick, a yes so shy it might have been a mistake. The crowd did not cheer. They stared as one, and in their collective gaze was a tenderness greater than triumph. The second point followed, and a third, but then the dark remembered it was vast and closed around them like a hand. The sky did not weep, could not, but if it had, the tears would have fallen warm and clean. "Thank you," it said. Mira exhaled. "This is only the first night." "Yes," said the sky, "and already the silence feels less alone." The crowd dispersed slowly, carrying their lanterns home as if escorting honored guests. The widow let her candle burn an extra hour, speaking to it in the voice she had once used for her husband when he returned late from the docks. The baker rose before dawn to make a loaf shaped like the moon. The sailor dreamed of a narrow channel where truth could pass without scraping either side. Mira rolled her blank map and placed it on the sill. She did not draw the 2 stars. She drew the table instead, the bridge, the river, the small sun in many hands. She drew the waiting. She drew the yes. The sky bent over the sleeping city like a parent over a cradle and promised what it had never promised before. "I will learn from you." And because promises are seeds, the dark that had seemed a wall became soil. Morning arrived like a careful apology. The city of bridges stretched, yawned, and remembered the faint two pricks that had returned to the night like shy guests. Bread lines formed, oars dipped, doors spoke in their hinge language. Far above, the sky watched mortals move within their small orbits and understood for the first time the bravery of ordinary gravity. Mira slept late with ink on her hands. When she woke, her blank map lay on the sill, the river's breath curling the edge of the paper. She touched the page and felt, not defeat, but a pulse, something beneath the whiteness, tender as a seed. "We made a place," she murmured. "Now we make a table." News traveled the way warmth does, from hand to hand. By dusk the old bridge wore a shawl of people. Bakers with aprons still dusted in flour, sailors with salt woven into their cuffs, teachers with chalk moons on their sleeves, a widower who had learned how to boil soup for one, a child with a jar that once held fireflies. They brought lamps, yes, but they also brought the little rituals that kept their lamps alive. A matchbox wrapped in oiled cloth, a flint stone worn smooth by hope, a whisper to flame before it woke. The sky bent lower not to command, but to attend. Mira cleared a space at the bridge's heart. There was no wood table to lift from a kitchen, no altar borrowed from a temple. They made their table out of time and attention. A square of waiting marked by 4 lanterns and the willingness to speak truth gently. "Set one light on the edge," she said, "and one story in the middle." The baker went first. He set down a beeswax candle that smelled like summer orchards. "My ovens failed for 3 days in winter," he said, "so I baked with memory. The bread rose anyway. Heat remembered itself inside the dough." The crowd hummed, the special sound people make when their hearts bow. A sailor set his salt-stiffened lamp. "A squall once took our mast. We drifted without a star. This lamp stayed alight because we circled it with our bodies and breathed together. We pretended to be a sky." The widower placed a tiny taper, trembling. "I talk to this flame so the house will answer," he said, half smiling at his embarrassment. "It does." Mira watched the offerings grow, not in number only, but in story. A midwife who carried a lantern through 7 storms. A mason who kept a coal from his father's hearth. A librarian who taught letters by candle to a boy whose eyes had never met constellation. She placed her own in the center last. A small sun of brass empty for now. "This one is for the light we hope for," she said. "Not possessed, not demanded, invited." The moon hovered close enough to taste their breath. "What do we do?" she asked the sky, a little afraid to disturb the listening. "We wait until waiting is a kind of song," said the sky. "And then we sing." They waited, and as they waited, Mira learned the grammar of invitation. It had no verbs of capture. It had pronouns that made room. It used conjunctions like bridges and. The wind slipped its hands into the sleeves of coats. The river held its tongue. A heron, pale and serious, stood on one leg and considered the doctrine of stillness. Deep under everything, the keeper of the deep stirred, less emotion than a lowering of its gaze. It felt the seam between mortal courage and cosmic ache and recognized a hinge. Law leaned toward mercy the way a tree leans toward a river. "Now," whispered Mira. They did not chant exactly. They told stories that faced one another like mirrors until light had too many places to hide. The baker described bread splitting when it had to. The sailor told of the night that finally stretched into morning because one man refused to close his eyes. A teacher recited aloud the alphabet of stars she once taught to children, even though the board above them was blank. The widower hummed his wife's old dishwashing tune until strangers wiped their eyes and did not apologize. The sky felt it, the moment mortals become large enough for a god to fit inside. "I remember something," it said, soft as moth wings. "Before the first dawn, there was an unlit yes. That yes became light." Mira lifted the brass sun. "Then say it with us." They said yes. Not shouted, not forced, opened. The word left their mouths and became air, then wind, then a small pressure at the edge of everything. The moon trembled like a coin about to be spent. A thin seam unraveled above the bridge. Not stars. Not yet. A clarity, as if the night had decided to be glass. Through that glass, an elder constellation peered with the timidity of someone returning to a house they left long ago. 2 more points woke and held. The crowd did not cheer this time either. They breathed through the fragile silence the way midwives breathe new lungs into a room. Somewhere far north, the old singer felt the hairs on his forearms lift. He opened his door and saw 3 small fires he thought he'd lost. "Welcome home," he said to no one and to all. "Why can't they all come back at once?" a child asked, not accusing, only curious. Mira knelt so her eyes were level with the child's lamp. "Because even light remembers fear," she said. "It needs to be trusted into being." The sky marveled. "Mortals teach the heavens to be brave." "Sometimes," said the moon with a shy tilt. "We learn slowly." They continued night after night. The table never left, because a true table is where you promise to come back. The people changed because true people do. A blacksmith who hated the dark came the 4th night and set down a coal he had carried in a lidded tin since his father died. He did not speak. He only nodded, which is one of the ways men pray. A girl from the river quarters brought a shard of mirror to double any light that dared arrive. A monk came and did not bring anything at all, only silence that pushed room into crowded places. Each evening, the sky bowed lower until the lamps brushed its breath. Each evening, a handful more points remembered their work and began again. Neighbors charted them with charcoal on doors. 1, then 3, then 5, then a crooked ladder that had once taught shepherds how to find home. The city softened. Street fights paused to watch for the next yes. Bread was left at thresholds. A bell ringer delayed the hour so the fragile would not be startled. On the 7th night, the master mapmaker returned with a stack of old charts. "We once believed the heavens were fixed," he told the gathered. "We were wrong. The fixed thing was our pride." He bowed to Mira, to the table, to the river, and then did something he had never done in 50 years of work. He left room on the chart for what he did not know. The moon's edge brightened. "Shall we tell them?" she asked. "Tell them what?" said the sky. "That their invitations are being heard from a distance greater than distance." "Not yet," said the sky. "Let them be faithful without reward for a little while longer. It sweetens the light." The moon loved the sky for that answer and laid a soft ribbon of silver over the bridge. That same night, the keeper of the deep turned 1 degree toward mercy. It is difficult to explain what that means for something that exists as law. Perhaps it allowed the old songs to be sung with new notes. Perhaps it gave patience a longer leash. Perhaps it opened the smallest door, the kind mice use and miracles. Out on the estuary, a lone lighthouse keeper polished his lens and found he was whistling. He could not have said why. In the mountains, a widow woke knowing which blanket to keep and which to give away. In a desert where the sky is usually a cathedral of fire, a caravan did not become lost because its leader trusted her camel when the compass betrayed her. None of these people would have blamed the stars for their fortunes or their lives. But if you had asked them, they would have said the night itself felt kinder, as if someone were holding the door. The child with the jar of old fireflies came back on the 8th night. She opened the lid and set the glass among the lamps. Nothing glowed within. "They're gone," she said, not sad, simply loyal to the truth. "Things that shine don't always stay," Mira said. "But everything that once learned to glow can teach a room how to wait." The child nodded, saving that sentence the way children save coins. She touched the empty jar and smiled. "It's still pretty." The sky took note. Beauty does not require brightness. It requires regard. Near midnight, a wind came that smelled of metal and old rain. The lamps guttered, fought, then leaned together as if to shield one another. People drew closer, shoulder to shoulder, learning the communal art of flame-keeping. "Is this part of the waking?" the sailor asked between his teeth. "Yes," Mira said. "Invitation includes weather." They held. When the wind passed, the lamps stood, carbon-bruised and proud. Above them, 10 stars now burned, no longer timid, but not yet triumphant. Enough to teach travelers the directions again. Enough to remind insomniac hearts that the world had a pulse outside their bodies. "Tomorrow," said the master, "we redraw the maps." "No," Mira answered gently. "Tomorrow we make space for a horizon that can move." The sky smiled. It is strange, perhaps, for a canopy to have a mouth, stranger still for it to smile. But what is a dawn if not the mouth of the night learning generosity? "What will you call this?" it asked. "This practice of making a place for light?" Mira considered. "Words are doors." "Hospitality," she said at last. "But for stars." The crowd repeated it softly, a benediction they could carry home in coats and pockets. Hospitality for stars. To fit the mouth. It warmed the tongue. The moon rolled it across her bright edge and tasted honey. They doused the lamps one by one, not as surrender, but as trust, letting the 10 points take a turn at being guardians. The river picked up their reflections and courted them down current to towns that had not yet heard. The bridge exhaled. Mira returned to her small room, set the blank map on the table, and drew her first firm line. Not a constellation, but a table. Not a coordinate, but a story. She left the rest uncharted on purpose. A true map must be roomy enough for wonder. Outside, the sky watched a city sleep and learned to count differently, not in miles or magnitudes, but in invitations offered and kept. It tucked the word hospitality into its oldest pocket, where it kept auroras and lullabies. Tomorrow, it promised the moon, I will ask farther than far. Whom? Asked the moon. The ones who went missing, said the sky. If they will not answer me, perhaps they will answer the shape the mortals have made. And deep beyond galaxies, where darkness is not absence but cradle, something turned. Dawn came pale, but the world felt gentler. 10 stars now glowed above the bridges, and yet the sky was restless. It sensed something beyond those who had awakened, a silence farther out, deep in the uncharted dark. Those were the unlit, the stars that had forgotten not just to shine, but why they were ever meant to. Mira felt the sky's unease before it spoke. The wind carried its whisper through the shutters of her room. Some still sleep where no song can reach. I must go to them. You can't leave, she said, stepping to her window. You are everything above. I can listen, said the sky, and that will be travel enough. That evening, she climbed the tower of the old observatory, where glass domes cracked like broken eyes still remembered how to look upward. She brought the blank map, the one she had never dared to finish. Then let me walk with you, she told the sky. You will listen above. I will walk below. The sky accepted, and thus began what later generations would call the pilgrimage of the unlit. A journey not of distance, but of devotion. They traveled through cities that had no names for wonder. Mira walked across salt plains that shimmered under the faint 10 stars like mirrors made of breath. She found villages that had never seen the heavens burn. To them, the dark was simply what things were. She spoke softly. The night can be taught to remember, and she showed them how to set lamps upon the water, hundreds of tiny bowls carrying flame. The river took them, and the sky bent low to kiss their reflections. Far above, a faint pulse stirred, not bright, but possible. Meanwhile, the sky moved through its vastness like a mother searching a house after the children are gone. It whispered to nebulae still curled in sleep, to galaxies that hummed too low for mortals to hear. Called the names of ancient lights, Arion, Vestra, Callan, Lyra, and each name returned only echo. Where have you gone? Asked the sky. A faint voice rose, thin, trembling, beautiful. We are not gone, said the chorus of the unlit. We grew afraid of being seen. Afraid? You are stars. And yet, said the voice, even light can tire of being looked at and never known. The sky faltered. It had never imagined the cost of its own glory. Back upon the earth, Mira met travelers drawn by rumor. A desert monk carrying an unlit torch, a painter who claimed color had abandoned her, a shepherd who followed only sound because sight had betrayed him. They became a small procession of seekers, each carrying what had forgotten to glow. At night they camped beneath the dim sky and told stories to the silence. Mira realized that the stories were becoming constellations of their own, small, living lights strung together by breath. The sky listened greedily, as though every word fed it warmth. One evening, as frost rimmed their tents, the sky spoke through the smoke of their fire. They fear being seen, because they have forgotten love that watches without taking. Mira nodded. Then we must learn to look with gentleness, not to claim but to accompany. She turned to the monk. Light your torch. It will only burn for a breath. Then let it be the breath that begins the next dawn. He struck flint. A spark rose. It was small, so small the wind almost refused it. But above, a single star opened its eye. The sky gasped. Another spark from the painter's trembling hand. 2 stars. A note from the shepherd's song. 3. Mira whispered the first words she had written on her blank map. Make a place for it. The fire shuddered. And far beyond mortal sight, the unlit began their slow return, not as command, but as courage remembered. By the 7th night of their pilgrimage, Mira saw a ribbon of faint white across the horizon, the beginning of what would one day be called the Milky Way. She wept, not for joy or sorrow, but for the simplicity of light rediscovering itself. The sky whispered, I thought I had lost them forever. They were only waiting, she said, for you to look with love instead of need. And so the sky learned humility, and the stars learned trust, and the mortals below learned that even absence can be a kind of teaching. When Mira returned to her city, the bridge was still there, the lamps tended, the table waiting. She set her map upon the stones, unfolded it at last, and for the first time it was not blank, not drawn by hand, but by glow, a living chart of the night reborn. She wrote beneath it, the stars did not return to be worshipped, but to keep us company. There came a night when silence no longer hurt. The stars, faint, trembling things, quivered like harp strings waiting for a forgotten melody. The air itself felt full, not with noise, but with listening. Mira stood upon the bridge that had become a temple without asking. Beneath her, the river murmured softly, reflecting the shy constellations that had returned. Above her, the sky breathed, hesitant and vast. They are remembering their names, Mira whispered, and the sky, older than any word for longing, stirred. Within its endless body something small and miraculous awoke. Rhythm. Not thunder, not wind, but a pulse. What is this? It asked the moon. It is the beginning of a song, said the moon. You once sang the world into being, but you have forgotten how to listen to your own voice. In the first days of creation, it was said that the sky did not speak, it sang. Every star was a syllable, every breath a dawn, every silence a rest between heartbeats of light. But grief, over centuries, had turned melody into echo, and echo into quiet. Now the sky's heart began to hum again. The hum deepened through the constellations, slow, golden, sorrowful, alive. Mountains shivered. Oceans turned silver under its breath. The moon closed her eyes and swayed like a lantern in the tide. The sound was not music as mortals knew it. It was older, made of gravity and prayer, the vibration of things choosing to exist. On the 8th night, fishermen in distant harbors found their nets glowing faintly, each drop of water trembling like a plucked string. A mother woke to the sound of glass singing in her window. A poet forgot the words to his lament because the silence was finally full enough to mean something. Mira climbed to the top of the old observatory, where glass and dust remembered centuries of watching. She spoke softly, "If you can sing, sky, then do not sing for us. Sing for yourself." The sky hesitated. "I do not know what joy sounds like anymore." "Then hum," Mira said, like someone remembering the taste of warmth, and the sky began. The hum came from the edges of existence, a low vibration spreading through every corner of night. Nebulae stirred. Planets leaned closer in their orbits, listening. Even the black between stars glimmered faintly, as though color had been waiting behind the curtain of nothing. The song rose slowly. It was made of everything the sky had ever heard and carried. The laughter of lovers, the screams of birth, the whisper of trees, the hush before a kiss, the sound of fire learning how to speak. All of it became a single breath of light. People felt it before they understood it. A farmer paused mid-step, feeling his crops pulse beneath the soil like sleeping hearts. A monk woke to find his prayer beads glowing faintly in the dark. A child told her mother, half dreaming, "The night is humming me a lullaby," and in that lullaby was forgiveness. Far beyond, the unlit heard it too. They who had once fled from the sky's gaze trembled in the darkness between galaxies. One by one, they stirred, their fear melting into the song that called them home. "You are healing," whispered the moon. "No," said the sky. "I am remembering. Healing is what remembering feels like." Mira lifted her lantern. "We have heard your song," she said. "Teach us to answer." The sky fell silent, curious. Then, one by one, the mortals began to hum. The baker at his oven, the sailor on his watch, the widow at her window, the child with her empty jar of fireflies. Their hums rose like prayers, imperfect and human, but full of life. The stars pulsed in time with them, and for the first time since the dawn of creation, heaven and earth were one choir. It was not harmony, it was conversation. By the 9th night, the heavens gleamed with a million lights. The melody that began as grief had become gratitude. The sky whispered to Mira, "You have given me back my voice." And Mira answered, "No, we only reminded you that silence can also be a song." In that moment, the wind, the sea, the mountains, and every beating heart became one chord. A sound so vast and gentle it filled even the spaces between atoms. Then the world exhaled. When dawn came, the horizon blurred. There was no line between earth and sky. The morning shimmered with the echo of that song, the first hymn of peace. And somewhere beyond the edges of the known, a single, long-forgotten star opened its eyes and whispered, very softly, "I remember." After the sky learned to sing again, a calm lingered. a hush that felt like the world taking its first true breath. The stars shimmered quietly, as if afraid to break the newfound peace. Yet somewhere among them, in the dim space between the living and the forgotten, a small flicker moved, not fully born, not yet named. Mira noticed it first. From the observatory's cracked dome, she saw the faint pulse, rhythmic and soft, like a heartbeat in the distance. "One remains," she whispered. "One light that doesn't yet know itself." The sky turned its gaze vast and patient. "Yes," it said, "the youngest of them, the one who watched while the others forgot." She stayed silent even when the song returned. "Why?" asked Mira. "Because she was never meant to shine like the others," the sky murmured. "She is not a star. She is the memory of one." The following nights passed in strange stillness. Mira dreamt of a child walking among the constellations, her bare feet leaving no trace. She carried a small lantern that glowed not with fire, but with something gentler, the echo of light itself. When the child turned her eyes toward Mira, they held galaxies that had never existed, possible worlds, unborn stories. "Who are you?" Mira asked in the dream. "I am the light that stayed," said the child. "The one who watched when even the sky forgot its voice." "Why have you come?" "To remember you," said the child simply. "For everything that shines must also be seen. And so I am here to see you back." When Mira woke, the lantern beside her bed, long extinguished, burned again faintly. Outside, dawn did not rise. The horizon glowed silver blue, as though caught between night and day. The sky spoke softly, almost in awe. "She has crossed into your world." Mira stepped outside. There, standing at the edge of the bridge where once prayers were whispered to the dark, was the child. She looked up, her face luminous yet fragile. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the hush of galaxies. "You brought us back," she said. "No," Mira replied. "You came when we learned to listen." The child smiled, a light too soft to be blinding. "I was born when silence and song finally touched. I am what happens when both are forgiven." Days passed, though no one could say how many. The child wandered through cities and fields, unseen by most, yet felt by all. Where she walked, people paused, as if remembering something they didn't know they'd forgotten. A blacksmith's fire burned steadier. An old woman's eyes brightened as she hummed to herself. A soldier laid down his weapon to watch the sky for the first time. Even the wind seemed changed. It no longer rushed. It listened. Mira followed her, not as a guardian, but as a witness. She realized the child was not teaching people to shine. She was reminding them that they already did. One night, Mira found her standing upon the same hill where she had first prayed for the star's return. The child's lantern flickered faintly, as if the light within had begun to fade. "Are you leaving?" Mira asked. The child nodded. "Light is not meant to stay. It travels so others may find their way." "Then what will happen to you?" "I will return to the song," said the child. "Every melody must rest before it begins again." Mira knelt beside her. "Will I see you again?" "You already do," said the child, touching her chest. "Every time your heart forgives the dark." And with that the lantern dimmed, not extinguished, but absorbed. Its glow spread across the horizon, turning night into a quiet dawn. The sky wept, not with rain but with shimmer, tiny drops of starlight falling like tears that blessed the world below. The following morning, the bridge shone faintly as though newly built. Mira placed her map upon the stones one last time, tracing the constellation of the child's lantern now immortalized above. Where there had once been emptiness, a new light flickered, small, patient, eternal. And the sky whispered gently, "She was never the last light. She was the first of the next." The dawn that followed the child's departure was not a dawn of gold or fire. It was soft, almost hesitant, as though morning itself feared to disturb the dream that lingered in the world's breath. For the first time in memory, the sky felt empty, not with loss, but with wonder. The song had ended, and in its quiet, the sky discovered something new, silence that did not ache. Below, Mira walked the bridge in the silver mist. Every step felt like crossing between two worlds that had finally stopped being apart. The stones beneath her feet still shimmered faintly, whispering fragments of the celestial melody. She looked up and smiled. "You're still here," she said softly. The sky answered, its voice faint as the wind through leaves. "I have not gone. I have become." For days light moved differently. It did not simply fall, it listened. The rivers gleamed even beneath the clouds. The faces of those who once feared the dark now glowed with quiet ease. No one prayed anymore, for prayer had turned into presence. And every night, when the stars appeared, they seemed to hum not from above but from within. People began to understand that the stars were not distant at all. They were memories of kindness, anchored to the fabric of existence. The sky, too, understood something profound. Its lament, the endless song of regret, had become the very rhythm that kept creation alive. Mira spent her days recording what she saw, though her quill no longer needed ink. Wherever she wrote, light followed, faint lines of gold that stayed even after the parchment faded. She wrote, "When the heavens learned to forgive themselves, the world began to remember how to breathe." And beneath it, she added a final line, "Light is not what you see, it is what you give." That night, she returned to the hill where the child had vanished. The sky above was calm, its stars countless and clear, but one shone brighter, a single spark at the edge of all things, pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to fade. "The child of the last light," Mira whispered. "She still sings." The sky replied, its tone like a smile carried on air. "She sings through you." Then something miraculous happened. The air shimmered, and from the horizon rose a band of light. Not sunrise, but memory itself, returning to where it began. The colors flowed like sound. The sound felt like touch. Every living being, from the tiniest root to the farthest star, trembled in recognition. And in that moment the sky sang one last time. It was not a song of creation or sorrow, but gratitude, the hymn of a universe that had finally understood its own heart. Once, I lamented what I lost, said the sky. Now, I shine because I remember. Mira closed her eyes, and the sound became light. It filled her, spread through her, and passed beyond her. The stars brightened once more, not from command but communion. The sky no longer watched over the world, it was the world. And the people below no longer reached upward, they lived as part of the same breath. The old maps turned to dust, the old prayers to silence. But from that silence, something eternal bloomed, peace. When the night returned, the stars blinked gently, like eyes half asleep. Their song remained, not in the air, not in the heavens, but within every living thing that had ever looked up and dared to hope. And so the lament ended, and light began. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. May your dreams remember the stars.